Hey Rachel, welcome on board Onions Talk. Would you be able to do a self-introduction?
So I'm Rachel Uwa, and I'm from the US originally, but I've been living in Berlin almost 18 years. And I originally came to Berlin after Bush was in office, and I didn't really believe in the politics of his administration, and I wanted to escape. Um, so I came to Berlin, and I have in the past been working in audio, and then I did some work in visual effects, and then I got into interactive technology and coding and things, and then as I was learning, I started to kind of get involved with organizations who also design workshops for people. So then I started to help to lead workshops and then organize workshops and design workshops. And I have been doing that for many years. Oh, I guess I would also add, I started my own school in 2014 called School of Machines Making and Make Believe. So that has been a thing that I've mostly been focused on for the last 7-ish years. And I think I'm basically with that designing courses that hover around art, technology, design, and human connection, and getting people to think critically about technology, but also using technology as a way to reflect on ourselves and society and to learn more. Um, I don't know if holistically is the word. I feel like that's a bit of a hippie word, but it's just like there's more than just, okay, download the software, let's begin learning or whatever. It's like yeah, a lot of things are involved in that, but that's, I guess, me in a nutshell.
We've known each other for a number of years now, but I don't think I've actually really heard your full story.
Oh, really? I
How,
left a lot of the bad parts out. There's still more, but yeah, I mean that's just the gist. Um,
but how interesting. Like, I didn't know that you left because of Bush's administration. Can you sort of, shall we backtrack a little bit to that? Like, what was the situation back then? What was your sort of life context at that point? Were you studying in audiovisual, or were you already starting to work? And then what made you decide on this like rather big, life decision to move?
yeah, well, at the time I was working in audio engineering and I studied it in school. I mean, I studied several things in school. It was a time when you could kind of jump around and study different things. So I started off with like journalism, photojournalism, and then got into social work, and then started to get into like philosophy and design, and then I ended up studying audio engineering because I loved music, or I still love music, but I realized the power of it because it makes you laugh and cry, and it can take you. It's like a time machine. It can make you like, go back to childhood or some specific moment when you heard a song and feel that same thing. So I think it's like some magical vehicle somehow. And so I wanted to be a part of that, but at the time I didn't feel like being a musician is the way for me. So I thought, okay, but I want to be involved in music, so I'm going to study audio engineering. And I did that in Chicago. And then I think it's like with a thing with like I get like really kind of obsessed with things. It's like you don't want to just like learn a thing, but just like you want to learn everything around it. So I was at the time also learning circuit design and equipment repair and working with an a microphone amplifier manufacturer, and he was teaching me circuit design. And so I had like many different jobs in audio, and I was also part of the Audio Engineering Society, and I was attending the microphone committees events because I wanted to design microphones. So this is like the story that I had for myself at the time. And so I was like completely immersed in the audio world. And then there was a conference in Amsterdam, the Audio Engineering Society conference in Amsterdam, that I was going to attend. And it was going to be my first time in Europe. And it happened to be that my plane was on the day that the US started bombing Iraq in 2003. And so it was like on the monitors in the airport, they were showing the beginnings of the bombings and things. And then if you looked around the airport, though, everybody was like enjoying themselves, or like, oh, we're going and flying internationally. How exciting. People were drinking, laughing. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand. Like, I can't believe these people. So then I was just like I went to the bathroom and I was just sitting on the floor and crying. And then one of the stewardesses was like, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And then I was just like, I don't know, you know? And so that kind of kicked it off. And then as I was in Europe for the first time, I was traveling, and then and every city there was a, or like major cities there were protests against the US. And so that was a really eye-opening experience. And then when I got back home, the people that I was working for were really conservative. And so then they were, of course, on the side of the government and feeling very scared, I guess, because of 9/11, and believing that what the US was doing actually had some reasoning behind it. But so I had to basically quit all my jobs because I was like, I can't work for conservative, well, I called them conservative idiots at the time. So, but yeah, so then that was crazy because, you know, I had dedicated many years to audio, you know, and I was in love with audio for many reasons. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I can't work here anymore. I can't be in this space anymore. And it was like leaving a career for my, I guess, political beliefs, which seemed super strange at the time. But then I thought, well, this is what you have to do, I guess, if you have ideals, you know. And so, yeah, then eventually I found a job in Berlin, and I I went there. And I thought I think my thinking at the time was, I'm ashamed of the U.S. right now, and Germans are ashamed of their history, and so it would be a nice fit, you know. So like all of this, like trying to deal with our shame kind of scenario. I thought that would be like a good environment. Um,
My
yeah.
goodness, that is so interesting that you found the connection and deliberately chose Berlin because of that. How how did it feel as an American, and also how does it feel as an American now? Pardon the thunder, out of my control nature, because well, with recent events with Afghanistan, and I just feel like it's so complex, you know, this entire situation in the Middle East, and there are private interests, there are economic interests, and there are things that are political, but it's not just purely political, it's business. And it's businessmen who are involved, and you know, the people who are sponsoring these campaigns are also the ones who have a stake in it and pushing for political agenda. And you know, like, I guess maybe this is a good time to digress a little bit and talk about this current situation in relation to the Iraq situation, where do we, you know, position ourselves as citizens? You know, how much power do we even have when you are a citizen of a country, but you are paying the taxes, but you are not necessarily able to make or contribute to some of these bigger decisions?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think either way it's painful. And I think the reality is that originally the motivation for going to Afghanistan isn't really, it wasn't humanitarian aid, you know, that was not the purpose. And so I feel like it's just really complicated in that regard, you know, because like technically they shouldn't have been there in the first place. But then I find it difficult these days when I see, you know, like Michael Moore, for example. I used to really appreciate Michael Moore because he was one of the few people who would stand up against the Bush administration back in the day, around 9/11 times. And but you know, recently I'm following him on social media, and I saw that he was like, yeah, Biden, get out of Afghanistan. Finally, we're going to be not supporting war. And, you know, I mean, normally I would be a person, I'm not supporting war, you know, I mean, I don't believe in war, but at the same time, it's created another chaos in the country. And so it can't be just so easy to say, yay, we believe in peace and not war, and now we're gone, and then end of story. It's like, you know, people have to kind of understand it's a little bit more complicated than that, and look at the situation for what it is. And hopefully other governments will also start to step in, you know. I mean, I don't really have high hopes that the US are people of, or, you know, like the government anyway, because the government is always different than the people. But I don't think the government generally does the right thing in almost any, you know, situation. So I feel like it's really difficult to know that the people who are supposedly, who we've been told all our lives are supposed to do the right thing, are not, you know. And I think I just hope that it becomes more and more clear to everybody, you know, that everybody would start to take a look at their governments and realize, oh, actually, they're not looking out for us, for the regular, you know, humans who are in their territory and for what we want. So so yeah, I don't know. I wish that would change, but I also feel a bit powerless, to be honest. And so I think for me, focusing on education and the little that I can do and trying to talk about things openly and creating a space for us to all get into this same headspace so we can figure out what possible solutions could be, even if it's on just a personal individual mental health scale. You know, I mean, that's enough. I think it's like we need everybody to understand at the minimum what's going on. And I feel like even that is the form of activism. It doesn't have to be protesting in the streets, but it can be just seeing what's going on and understanding it, and understanding like that it's much more complicated than what the news is going to you know, portray.
Yeah, definitely. And on that, well, I'm not an expert in the situation of Afghanistan and in the historical political context, but I kind of want to just touch on it just on the more individual perspective. So when I was in France, I was working with asylum seekers, most of them kind of minors. So there were a couple of them who were from Afghanistan. So when that happened, I reached out to them and I was trying to help in whichever ways that I could. And so it's been like many weeks of trying to help them, trying to get the right information from them to be able to translate documents into English and to be able to send emails out and all of that. And the situation on the ground was that it's really difficult. You know, it's a privilege to be able to even have a passport there. And it's a privilege to be able to speak a language that is not just their native language. And the kind of things that are demanded and asked to be on the evacuation list, you needed to be, you know, in the kind of international jobs to be able to have the right documents for it. And the situation on the ground was that if you had family members or you yourself worked in journalism, activism, or with the National Afghan military or the National Security Police, then you are targeted by the Taliban. And even if your family members died during that period by the Taliban, when they started taking over, your house was like bombed. They were hunting you down and shooting, like kids died along the way from like families or friends. And it's just such a devastating situation. And I'm all the way at the other end of the world, like in Singapore, trying to figure out what is going on so that I can type out a coherent narrative. And I couldn't do much because they didn't have the necessary documents or information. Like, what can you do when everything has been bombed? You know, like your house is in ashes, all the documents are there. They don't have the passports, they don't read or write. You know, it's a privilege to even be literate. And even if they have family members or they themselves have worked for American military, foreign military, the situation was like with the US side, the applications were so complicated. It was almost impossible to be able to submit something. On the UK, French side, and some other countries, it seemed a bit better. Like on the ground, it feels like there were several different decision makers. There was on the political side, like whatever that they said to international media that they will try and evacuate. I don't know how true that translates to what they're working on the ground. It feels like it's very split. There are like, you know, maybe ministers or administrators that are trying to help as many people as possible, but then also it feels like they are not really trying that hard to help people. It feels like it's split according to the individuals working. And then on the ground, the military troops that are there are trying to collect as many people as possible. But for the Americans, it seemed like a different story. It just felt like there were so many different perspectives and different agendas. And it was like the place was full, the airport was full. It was so difficult to get on the list. You had to call or something just to be able to get a meeting to be on the list, and then they will look through your documents. And it was just, there was just no reply from, you know, all these emails that I sent. And fair enough, for some they didn't have the right documents for it. And mind you, these are families that are in immediate danger. They are actively being hunted, and you know, their houses have been targeted, and they are kind of on the run. And it was just like the kind of hopelessness. Like when I'm having these conversations with my friends, it kind of went from I'm sensing from them like shock, and then anxiety, lots of mixed feelings, and then slowly just despair, devastation, hopelessness. And it got to a point where there was nothing more I could do. Like, there wasn't any more email I could send. I didn't have the right documents. Just getting the right information and getting some documents, it took like 1 or 2 weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks. And then once we start sending out, it was kind of too late, and it was really disappointing towards the last week. Like almost everyone evacuated on Friday, while there was still the weekend. And over the weekend, I think it was mostly just American flights, and it feels like their priority is really just their own people rather than the Afghans.
Mhm.
And I tried asking around, and it just felt like a situation where we were leaving people to die. I mean,
Mhm.
politically, I don't feel like I'm in the right position to say what is right or wrong. Like when I was in London and doing some participatory artwork, I remember that I had a conversation with this guy, and he was from Africa, and I think he's a bit of an extremist. Well, actually, not really a bit. He's quite an extremist, like almost like the opposite end of me. And he was telling me that he really hated Westerners, and that everything that was on Western media, it's propaganda, and everything was fake. And that back then I did an exhibition that was with like a short film that I made with my Syrian friend, talking about the Syrian refugee crisis back then. And he was talking in a video about how the situation in Syria was, and like President Assad's like involvement in all of that atrocities. And this guy was telling me that this president was trying to do his best for the country and for the people, and that all the genocide and everything that we're seeing on the news, it's Western propaganda. And he didn't even believe what my friend was saying, when he is a Syrian from that place, from that country, who has escaped and was telling his story. And then it made me realize, his perspective. I spent 2 hours really trying to talk to him and understand his perspective. And I realized, right, if you're exposed to all these YouTube videos, contents that is of these kind of extremist narratives and views, it's very easy to understand where that's coming from, because there is so much anger, that these Westerners came to my land, colonized us, took our resources away, did business and exploited us, and we need to chase them out. And I think there was a lot of that anger that came from that, which then I think manifested into all these different extremist groups. And maybe there are other reasons out there that we don't know of, because it's not like outright on the media. But for me, it's trying to process all that is happening in the world. And I feel like from back then, Syrian refugee crisis, or even like the 9/11 attacks when I was like really young, and now with all of these situation and politics, I guess then the question is like, it's very difficult to try and understand, whereas maybe there is a lot of selfishness, there is a lot of greed involved. But what do we, as people, citizens of the world, as one like shared humanity, make of this situation? And I felt, being in Singapore, where everything is so safe and comfortable, and just I felt so disjointed, where everyone just seems so comfortable and they can afford to not care about the situation. For them, it's just news. It's just news that, oh, it's sad that that happened, and then they forget about it, and that's it. And we go on with our daily lives. And I just felt like I was living in a different reality. I was hearing about my friend's family, like people are dying, and I'm on WhatsApp trying to get information, and things are urgent there, and I'm trying to live my life here, and I've got my work, and I just feel like I was split between spaces. And I realized I didn't really have people to talk to who would understand this, because my experiences are so different from everyone else in the country. And I don't it just feels like I don't even have the right people here that I could talk to about something like this.
Mhm.
And it makes me think, like, this is not going to end just like that. It's not that now that the military have all evacuated, it doesn't mean that the situation ends there. There might be less media attention, but things are still happening. But what do we do as individuals then? Like, how do we prepare ourselves emotionally for all of these situations that's happening? And also keeping in mind that with the climate crisis, we're seeing news of bushfires, wildfires, floods, and all these destruction. People are losing their homes. This is the new normal. And what do we make of this situation? What does solidarity mean in a time like now that we're living in this world?
Mhm. Well, those are big. Those are big questions. Yeah. And also, I mean, thank you for also even. I mean, I noticed you were, yeah, really trying to kind of get some reaction from people and some information for people and things. And I know it's really. I mean, it's commendable that you even tried, and I know it's really difficult. Especially when it doesn't seem like other people are caring, I mean, that's like the biggest thing. It's almost like gaslighting. Like you're like, am I perceiving this wrong? Because why? It's like, did something happen that I don't know about and everybody knows it but me? Because why am I the only one giving a damn? So I feel like, yeah, mental health, I mean, like, it's difficult, and I think like part of the thing that happens with me, I notice, is that I will be really upset about something, to then the point of like first anger and then just kind of despair, as you said, and then something else will happen where I realize, okay, I need to put my efforts here, like I can be useful here, like I can make people aware about things here, and then it's kind of a cycle. It's like, that like the attention focus that we have is kind of broad, and then so we're seeing things, we're being upset and trying to think of ways to change them, and then inevitably feeling like, okay, I can't do something here, but wait, I can do something here, and something should be done here, let me do something here, and then until your attention sways again, and it's like, okay, well, there's that thing. And I mean, I think at the very least, again, it's like, understand like that we take in this information about how humans behave in the world, so we're not naive in thinking that governments are there to support the people and people to do the right thing. Media is there to just inform people of what's happening, and like all of these structures are really they're really messed up. And especially with journalism, because I mean, I had studied journalism at the beginning, and I believed in the integrity of it, and now I feel like that is all gone for the most part. And I mean, yeah, there are still good people trying to do good things and inform people, but there's so much fake news and people believing just lies. And I mean, I think I basically I've had this for many years, this belief that we've all been told different lies, and so this is how these things happen. It's like we started off like maybe our families just showed us different things, or we heard different things, and so now here we are, and we're all kind of have a lot of misinformation. And yeah, I think that really the only thing we can do is call people on it when we are faced with them right in front of us. I mean, ideally not on social media, it's going to be futile, because there's always going to be trolls. But if you're standing in front of a person, you're having a discussion, and they are saying some things that are just clearly not true, it's like making them question that and like call them on it and have a discussion about it. Because yeah, then that's like, at least you plant a seed of like, hey, what you're saying might not be true, hopefully. And then I feel like that's all we can really do in a way, which is, I know it's just like feels so like nothing, it feels so tiny. But on the other hand, I feel like it's the same thing I think about, when I see adults that are jerks, and I'm like, how did this person go through their entire life? Did nobody ever call them on their shit? Like, what's going on with that? And I feel like, yeah, it's like we need to call people on the things that are not quite right and have a discussion about it, and then get them to understand that might not be completely true, and hopefully they will start to question it. And I feel like that's the thing, we need to reach everyone. It's almost like we need to reach every human on earth one-on-one, which is like obviously a huge daunting task, and no one person can do that whole thing. So that's why I think coalitions, community building, coalition building is really important, because you get people on the same page on a certain topic in the world, and then you do what you can to share that knowledge with others, and when it doesn't work, you are there to support each other, um, and help keep each other mentally stable, because it's definitely challenging on that front. And really, I mean, the reality is we're only as good as our health and our mental health, and if we let that fail us, then we're nothing. And so each time when faced with these traumas of the world that we can't really do very much about, it's like, I think it's important to be angry and important to recognize what's going on that's wrong, but then also to have a boundary to not let it break you, you know, because really what we need to be like have some stamina and the ability to recognize where we need to put our energy in order to have a positive outcome in the end, you know, because like we all want to help make positive change before we die. And I don't think, for me, I mean, for sure, it's that feeling is not going to end, right? It's like, so it's almost like this is our mission. We're like, in a way, little missionaries. And we're like, we're trying to like find ways to do good in the world. And we have to not forget that. So even though we kind of get confronted with these painful things, and it's like they're all kind of like feeding our knowledge and understanding and ability to understand the world for what it is and humans for what they are. But we still have to kind of go and move forward. So I feel like that's like a daily process, you know. It's not even like, oh, you know, this happens over a period of a month or something. It's like every day is like constantly faced with the things and kind of like having to pull back, recharge, find a way to make some kind of impact. And it's like, yeah, it's a daily process. So yeah, it's heavy.
You know, for me, I think this is activism. This is the real activism for me, like really putting the time and the energy to open up these spaces for conversations and to try and change mindsets and perspectives one by one. And maybe it's us who needs changing. I don't know. Sometimes it's, you know, finding a bit of that neutrality or using empathy to understand where the other person is coming from so that you can also understand where the pain is from. But what I'm hearing here is also the ability to hold conflict. And I think one of the starkest contrasts I felt since coming back to Singapore was I think in Asian cultures, it tends to be more non-confrontational. So then conflict is always seen as something that is bad. And on the topic of activism, it feels like, you know, you shouldn't be angry all the time, or, you know, you should maintain your calm. So then when something agitates you, you should go back and meditate. And for me, it's kind of like, must we be this passive? Like, okay, I understand that thought process where, right, maybe, you know, like having more neutrality or peace or calmness and like that kind of meditative state, it's better for the world in general in terms of the energy. But then also without the kind of activism like Black Lives Matter and these kind of conversations that really pushed these agenda forward and opened up these conversations in which, you know, otherwise people of privilege wouldn't realize about these things that they needed to be educated on, we wouldn't have the progress that we have now. And I feel like there's something in there about education, not just, you know, talking about like let's educate the young or whatever, like it's too late for the older people. I mean, I think that's bullshit. It's like, you know, how do we open up the kind of daily education and lifelong learning, which is essentially what your school is about, in terms of being able to hold space for such conflict, but in a way that is empowering, in a way that is constructive, in a way that allows us to be able to talk about these differences or open up a constructive conversation. And this is really difficult because, you know, when you have your beliefs and your point of view, and when someone says something like, I don't know, super sexist or whatever, there is always anger that surfaces. But the key is like, how do you not continue the conversation in a judgmental way, but try and, with as much empathy as possible, open up a space to try and understand where the other person is coming from, and then to have a productive conversation on that.
Well, I think actually it has to do with recognizing that it starts with us as humans and so questioning the human experience. What does a human experience in their lives, and what leads them to later making good or bad decisions, you know? And a lot of, I mean, I was listening to a comedian the other day. I think I listen to a lot of comedy actually, because I feel like because it's everything feels so heavy, and it's like sometimes you just need to laugh. But it was like this one comedian, he was saying something about, oh, if anybody wants to know what their troubles are, I could probably tell you, and I've had a lot of therapy. Basically, everything boils down to childhood, and everybody, you know, like all the trauma from there. I mean, it was funny. You had to be there because there's like some funny stories about his childhood, but but that's true though. In fact, it's actually a truth that he said through this comedy. And so one of the things that we're doing at School Machines, for example, is this thing called Serial Party. And so it started in physical space where there would be a festival, like a yearly festival, for example, Transmediale in Berlin, which is kind of an art, tech, culture festival, or Pictoplasma, which is like one of my my favorite character design festival that happens in Berlin. So we have partner with them on occasion. And so basically it's like when there are crowds of people to do this thing called Serial Party, where a small group of people come in, like five, it's like in physical space, it was like 5 minutes, five strangers, and a bowl of cereal. That was like the tagline. But like we started to do them online since the pandemic. And the idea is basically to get people to come together in small groups and talk about personal things. And so the first one we had done this, online was called Please Don't Put Your Dick in My Face. And the thing that I wanted people to do was to talk about how the challenges of intimacy, you know. And so like even in a relationship where someone is there that you supposedly love each other, but you can't say something important that needs to be said, you know, and why is that the case? And so we, you know, people joined the call and we had these really lovely conversations. And then the idea is that for each conversation we have, we kind of see where the theme is leading next. And then we have the following Serial Party 2 months later will be on that next topic. So it's as if like we're trying to get a conversation started and then see how it evolves and kind of follow that through. And so then the next one after that was called Daddy Issues. And the thing that became clear is that almost everybody has issues with their fathers. Either they were absent, abusive, or you know, anything in between from that situation. And yeah, these are things that like that we have to, it's like our human behavior on a daily basis has to do with how we experience the world as children. And like our first understanding of how humans relate to each other. And if we had really bad examples, which I definitely did, so I mean, I feel like in a way I'm like a walking miracle because I had so many bad examples. It was like ridiculous. I feel like I shouldn't even be here right now. And luckily, so this is why I just think that it's possible everyone can survive. Like it's possible to separate yourself from your experiences in life and to understand we are not our experiences and we are not our thoughts. And to, I don't know, I feel like that's a really important mental health tool that people can build up. Um, but yeah, I think that the point is that the issues are deeper than which political party you support or don't support, you know. It's like you need people, we need to stop I mean, that's just how I feel anyway. I think it's like I don't necessarily feel the strong desire to debate about politics anymore, but I'm like, what was your life like as a child? What was your experience as a human? What has impacted you in both positive and negative ways? And I feel like once we know that, then we can look at like, okay, then it makes sense that you're thinking these things because of this, or you're doing that because of that. You know what I mean? So like, so I feel like really in that way, this is why it is real individual work. Like activism is like one person at a time and not like large groups of people at a time, because we all have had these different experiences, and you can't just address a group of people and say like, okay, we've all had these experiences, because you need to talk about them. Like people need to know that they're seen and that experience is recognized and it's put into context of the person that they've become, you know. So I almost feel like that should be like, yeah, the political party of everyone, of like one-on-one, or like, I don't know. So that's what I always go back to, you know. It's like as much as I can be upset about everything that is happening in the world, and every day there's a new painful scenario for sure, I'm always like, okay, well, what can I do as one human? And I think it's like start these very personal and at times painful conversations with people and give them a space to articulate their experiences and start from there, basically. So I don't know. That's my approach anyway, as far as it goes.
It's this participatory art, like dialogic art, and it's so powerful. And I always find it difficult to explain that. When you write proposals or whatever, or like impact evaluation report, like, I talk to people and I talk about personal stuff. Like, it's very difficult to try, like, how has a person changed or whatever, but there is so much value in just creating the space to have such personal and intimate conversations, and to allow people an opportunity and the time and space to be able to express their lived experiences and to talk about how they feel, because it feels like it feels like a privilege. Not everyone has the opportunity or access to be able to talk about these things. How was it for the participants that took part in it? Like, was it intimidating for them to be part of these conversations at the start?
I mean, the thing is that they're small groups of people, and the thing is, like, we're all interested. Like, everyone who joined the call, for example, on daddy issues, they're like, just wanted to let it out, you know? It's like you just want to, like, acknowledge the situation and meet other people who also had similar things, and then just to be like, okay, what happened with fathers? You know, what happened? Why were they so cold? Why unreachable, impossible to communicate with, and all these things. And I think that's kind of the thing that we come together to try to figure out together, what the hell just happened, you know, like, and to put it in perspective. And I think people want to do that, but I think the thing is that I think that it has to happen in small groups again. So it's like, you know, because people only will open up in very small groups. And so I think this is just the challenge. I think, you know, kind of what you just said, it's the unfortunate scenario that people don't understand the importance of this work, you know, because everybody's so busy thinking about like business and degrees and titles and whatever, that they don't understand the importance of, you know, the one-on-one connection. And if they do, then they would probably see it as a thing you don't talk about, because people don't talk about therapy and mental health, at least, like, you shouldn't, you know, talk about that with, you know, just people in general. You should save that for a therapist or a very specific place, and in that case you pay someone to do that job, and then, you know, and it's like you shouldn't bring it into your life. And so, but it impacts our entire life, so it's like, why do we have to reserve those conversations there? So I feel like, actually, I mean, we've talked about this before, and I think this is really the work, is how do we get people with or like look for the possibilities of funding when people don't even understand the importance of this work, and how do we get this work to be recognized for the value that it provides, and then get funding for it, you know? Because I mean, I think like both of us, we're doing this work and we're not getting paid for it, really, you know? It's like, I don't get paid for doing these things. It's like a thing that you do because you know it needs to be done, and it's so important. And I think we couldn't even not do it if we wanted, and yet we're getting no compensation whatsoever. And it's like, so it's like, it's very unfortunate, because we have to find ways to survive, and the majority of the work that we know is important to do, we're not getting the recognition and the compensation for it. And so I think obviously it makes other people not want to take on this work either, you know, because they're also trying to survive. So we need to find a way to get recognition for like socially engaged art. I mean, if that's the category we would put this in, or I mean, I don't know, what do you think? Are there other terms this whole thing could fall under, that we can start to like slowly build up the recognition of its importance? Or what do you think?
There are so many different terms, even among like the socially engaged art category art space. So like participatory art, um, social art, social practice, community art, dialogic art. And something that I learned over the past months, I guess past year, is that if we are flexible enough with the terms, because the work that we do is so interdisciplinary, we can go to different pockets of spaces. So like it could be about sustainability, it could be about communities. And if it's about communities or social work, then, you know, it opens up a lot more funding where people understand what social work is. People understand like communities, kind of. People understand grassroots, even if grassroots doesn't have that much money or funding. But when you look at social work or therapy, which actually this kind of work does kind of encompass a lot of these different, like varying degrees of these different disciplines. And if we could use the art side as the unique point or the niche to then go into like the social work spaces to get certain funding for it, or, you know, other spaces, then I feel like there is a possibility there. But what I'm increasingly realizing while being in very non-art spaces is language and vocabulary, because people just don't understand when you talk about socially engaged art. People don't understand because they've not experienced it before. A lot of times, you know, for them it's like, right, workshop facilitating a conversation, like I don't want to do any more of that. You know, you get every sort of workshop at every event. I don't want to sit down and talk to people, but they've not experienced the kind of conversations we've had that isn't just superficial, you know, that isn't just very transactional, that is something that opens up, you know, something that is really vulnerable, but still maintaining a space that is safe enough for people to be able to express and talk about it, and closing it in a way that doesn't leave a scar, you know, like closing it properly. And there is so much skill, there is so much practice, and there is so much experience that is needed for this kind of work. And it's always a constant learning and progress. And I feel people don't really understand that, also because people don't experience it enough. So recently I started this thing, which I've been wanting to do since coming back to like for about a year now, but because of COVID, I couldn't really do it until now that things started opening up. So I've been trying to connect with my local neighborhood. So I grew up in this area, but I, you know, after 6 years abroad, coming back, I realized, wait a minute, I don't actually know people around. Like the places, it has changed. Like the playgrounds that I grew up with, they don't look the same anymore. There's been so many renovations, the shops are not the same. And even the houses have changed, people have moved in and out. And I was like, right, I do this work, but I don't even know my neighborhood that I grew up in. I need to start connecting with people and finding out who they are, and to just connect, and then to have an idea of what makes this place home for them, like what was the history of this place, what connects them to this place, what makes this like their root. And then I had this I started doing these participatory art interventions, public interventions, which it's my first in Singapore. I've been quite hesitant because it takes a bit of courage in a place like Singapore. Like I'm kind of testing boundaries, and it's quite interesting. So I talked to this guy, and he was telling me that, you know, back in the days when people were living in kampongs, which are kind of like villages, there was a lot more interconnectivity, you know, because there wasn't a supermarket or anything like that. So if you needed an egg, if you needed oil, you go to your neighbors and you borrow. And because there is this sense of interdependence, you actually form deeper social bonds and connections and communities. But nowadays, because we are so self-sufficient and individualistic in a way, because of this, the environment that shaped this, we don't need to, you know, ask for an egg from a neighbor. We can just go on a 5-10 minutes walk and we get to the grocery store. So then this almost takes away the opportunities for us to interact with each other. Even when you go to the park, you go there and you do your exercise and you move on, you know, like there aren't really spaces for people to open up conversations. And while I stationed there for a couple of hours, like it's quite interesting the varied expressions that I got. Like there was people who just were curious, they stared at me, and then some gave like the what's she doing kind of look. And then there were people who were just like smiling and okay. And then there was some, like, you know, a couple, like quite few, that would stop by when I say hi and, you know, like, what are you doing? This is interesting. And then they start talking with me about it. And everyone has so many stories to tell about this place. And I think what's really wonderful is when I start talking to people and then someone else joins in, and then suddenly this group that becomes bigger, they start having conversations that's beyond me. And I think this is really the starting point that seeds like the kind of connection and communities and local spaces. And for me, I guess this is place-based art, like creative practice, creative placemaking. And what I'm hoping to do is to eventually bring these conversations beyond that to become like, what do you think about the climate? What do you think about race? What do you think about our identity? What do you think about living with each other? And to just, open up these spaces where people can question a little bit more. It's almost like conversation zones in public spaces where people could come freely in and out to participate. I don't know how far I can go with this or how long, but I feel like there is this need, where we are just the way that cities are built and designed. You live in your apartment and that's all you've got, like even within an apartment, if you are renting a place, if you don't have the kind of relationships that you form with your flatmates or put in the time to form those relationships, a lot of times you're just in your room. And like places like London where I lived, there wasn't even a living room. Your kitchen was so tiny. So then you cook and you go back to your room to eat, and then like there's no interaction even in the same flat. And in a situation like COVID, when you're pretty much isolated from everything else, what does this mean in terms of our relationships, day to day? And I guess for our kind of work that crosses into so many different spaces and disciplines, it is actually so much more so much more than whatever is on the website or whatever people understand it as, because it's relational. It's about relationships. It's about all these different things that you're activating and the questions that you're seeding and conversations that you're opening up. And it's about, I would also think, a constant sort of reflective inquiry process that is not just within us, but also within everyone else that we're trying to open up. And how did your experiences, life experiences, then get to the School of MA and everything that you're doing? Because I feel like you found a way to include all that you're questioning in this world with your life experiences into this school, and you're doing it in a very unconventional way. Do you have some examples that you can give of like the work that you're doing at the school? How are you bringing in some of these elements?
Well, I think that, I mean, originally I was really just interested in getting more women involved in technology, I think, and also getting people to make, I guess, be more radical with their choices of what they're creating with technology. Because, I mean, great, you can blink an LED on and off. Like, it didn't seem like interesting enough for me. And I'm like, what matters is really what people do with the technology, not that they're doing anything. I mean, it's not enough to just play with technology, but like, what do you have to say? And so I started to kind of, I think by the second year of the school, I started to really think about, or try to get people to think about who they are and what they care about, and to put that into the work that they're creating. And so, and I think probably from that point, I mean, because it was always about getting people to open up about who they are. And I think I just realized that actually, so after you start that conversation, that what they should do is to put that into the work that they create. Because, I mean, as a creative human or artist, I think that a lot of times you don't, you want to make something and you're not even sure what it is. And then you start to make it. And then only after you've made it, can you see what you even were thinking, which is quite a fascinating experience, I think. But it could be like putting this thing together and then it's like, oh yeah, I mean, that's my childhood right there, or like my relationships, or like whatever, it's like, it can be very easily then analyzed. And so then it's great because you're separated from it. It's its own thing. And then everybody can have their own interpretation of the thing, and you can better understand your own motivation, because it's like, oh, I just spent 50 hours making this thing. Why did it mean so much to me? And then kind of break it down for yourself. But I think anyway, having had a complicated childhood, I just knew that wasn't all there was, that wasn't even the right way. What happened to me was really very wrong, in fact. And I wondered how many other people had to experience, really like things they shouldn't have had to. And yet here we all are trying to get X degree, or trying to work in X field or whatever. And so like our experiences don't go away just because we have goals to work in a certain area or something like that. And so then it was like, okay, well, I then I then kind of believe everybody's got the area that they could stand to use more clarity on for themselves, like kind of like either mental health issues or just, I don't know, in relationships and all these kinds of things. So anyway, I decided that I thought it was really important to put that into the work. And so what I'm doing right now, for example, let's say with machine learning, because people are really interested in the topic of machine learning, and so we offer classes on machine learning, but in this space of machine learning, we get people to think about what is our human experience, you know, because here we are coming together to talk about the machine experience, but do we really even know our own human experience? And yes, we've lived through things, but have we really thought about how and why those things happened and how they've affected us? And so I feel like, in a way, I'm trying to meet people where they are. They're in a place where technology is fascinating and technology is very necessary, and it's invading our homes and workspaces. And how can we connect all these things together so that we have, like, again, I'm using this holistic word, and I never use this holistic word. I have no idea why it's coming out today already for the second time, but I guess in a way it's just like, because I feel like I want to be a whole human. You know, it's like, and I feel like I have been broken in many different ways, and I've been trying to kind of get back to a human that I can understand. And I think everybody really wants that secretly, but doesn't know how to go about it. And so I'm trying to help people do that through creativity and new technology and all these kinds of things. So this is the experience that I'm creating. I guess if you want to call it my participatory art practice, this is like what I'm doing to bring people in to educate ourselves on technology, on society, on ourselves, human experiences, and all the things. I think it's not necessary to separate those things. And I wish that more people would understand that, you know, and more educational institutions or workplaces would understand that, so that we can start to become those whole human beings instead of separating and compartmentalizing our lives because it's appropriate in this setting and this something else is appropriate in another.
Here's the thing that I learned um, over the past months, that society likes to see things in categories because then it's easier to understand. So then, right, you are the social worker, you are the artist, or you are whoever. And I got to a point of realization where, because my work is so interdisciplinary, often I find it very difficult to explain what I do. And then I realized it doesn't matter. Like, you know, it my work, whether it's considered art or not, it matters in so far in which I want to get certain opportunities or funding in the art space, which then is not about really the art, it's about the institution, what is recognized, how do you speak the language, how do you build up your profile as an artist and your CV, portfolio, whatever, to then be able to be recognized in that space to get that kind of opportunities. But then actually the work that we do, it matters and there is value. And on its own, the kind of impact that it can have, it doesn't matter what labels it's put on. But then it matters if we want to navigate this world to get the kind of resources to be able to support that, which again then is the really tricky bit in terms of like social entrepreneurship, because how do you how do you sell something like this, you know, like how do you sell a human experience, how do you sell something that is relational, how do you sell something that isn't outcome driven? Because every time, you know, you talk to like in a business space or when you try and like have a product or service to offer, they are always looking at the outcomes. What are your deliverables? What is it that you're offering exactly? And sometimes it's like you don't know you're offering a journey. You're offering a journey to delve deeper into who we are as human beings, how we could connect with one another, how we could learn from one another, how could we unpack our feelings, our emotions, our experiences in a way that is authentic and genuine and able to better understand each other, hold a space of empathy for other people, but also for ourselves, and how to, you know, unpack a lot of these experiences. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's painful, but then how could that become a reflection point in which we improve and get better and, you know, heal ourselves from there. And I think that's the difficult point, right? Like how much more bridging there needs to be in this world. And I feel there is a shift, from the kind of conversations we're having, and language vocabulary is so important when we talk about climate, cross-sectionality. That's a term that's coming up so often. When I first came back to Singapore, in the business space, I was using all these terms like regenerative futures and like things that are not that uncommon in the climate conversations. And people back here were like, you need to stop using these jargon. People don't understand it. It's complicated. Keep it simple. But actually, the terms matter, the vocabulary matter, because what it stands for is a new area of knowledge and understanding of the world, and a new way of seeing these relationships in the world. And there needs to be effort made by every individual to try and understand that, because then it expands our vocabulary, and with that, an expansion of our understanding of the world and relationships, and then culture, and how we relate with one another as human beings, but also how we relate with nature. And I feel like, I don't know, do people just want to go the comfortable way out and just see things in simple terms? How do we, I guess this is also part of your work then, how do we unpack things that are difficult, complicated, but that are necessary in our understanding and education and awareness?
Well, I think that actually, I would say that probably the people who are telling you to use different vocabulary are probably correct, to be honest. Because I mean, it's like, but I have a bias, of course. I have a bias against academic speak because I've read many, academic papers. I remember when I was still involved with like microphone design, for example, and kind of reading these like very technical papers put out by microphone companies, and like kind of understanding all of the like frequency response and all the different kinds of things they were talking about that were certainly very relative to the design of the microphone. But then I was thinking, like, then on the other side you have recording people, and they're different languages, and I always actually, at that time when I was working in audio, I was like, I want to be the bridge between this complicated topic and communication and the recording artist who doesn't give a damn about all of the technical words, and he just needs to get a great recording, so like, and in a way, it's like, when I read a lot of academic papers, I'm thinking, why do you put this in a way that makes it inaccessible to the common human who also needs to understand these works? And so in that way, I feel like we really should be saying everything as if we're speaking to a 5-year-old, or I mean, because a 5-year-old knows a lot. It's funny because I feel like people use that phrase in a way to be like, just talk down or something, like talk like, whatever. But it's actually like 5-year-olds, we need to give the 5-year-olds credit, because I feel like a lot of people also are not treating children as humans, as little humans, they're treating them as like objects or something. So, but that's a whole other conversation, I guess. But so yeah, I mean, it could be that you say the thing you need to say, but then you have hashtags that are the words that you mean, and then maybe those hashtags, after they kind of see what you're saying, and then maybe eventually those hashtags become interesting for people, that they might click on them and then learn a new term or something like that. But I don't think you should have to understand those terms in order to benefit from the work that we're talking about. And yeah, I mean, I think partially though, it's why I start off with promoting a machine learning class, because I don't say come, and like, I'm offering you a journey into yourself, that's not like really how the wording is on the website. Because the reality is, I want them to leave with new skills that they can use for their for like a better job, or to just kind of like go further in their career, or to feel like a better human, or whatever the situation is. But I don't need to make it sound like a hippie class that, because it's like, then you're speaking to a different audience. And so it's like, you have to know who your audience is, who are the people who are interested in the area we're working in, which is creative technology. And yeah, but I mean, in general, I think creative technology is kind of like a gateway drug in my mind, in order to understand more about technology in general. Because with creative technology, it's not about the goal of learning how to use something as an expert. It's like playing with it so you can see some results, so you can be excited about them, so then you can feel like, okay, hey, I could do that. I didn't think I could do that before I did it, and now I can do that. What else can I do? And so that's kind of the thing that I'm really interested in having people experience, and then to kind of like as if it would flip a switch, and then all of a sudden they realize that they can do a lot more than they thought they could, but they never tried. So you need to find it like kind of a way to bring them in that's kind of interesting and not too overwhelming and quite simple, I guess, in its wording, so that they can even see it as something that's a possibility for them, I think.
What was your most memorable or interesting lesson
In
in
context of,
like just anything that comes to mind, like of all these years that you do this work? What are certain experiences or conversations that really left an impression in you?
I think actually the thing that I've learned, I think that the biggest lesson was you have to build up trust at the beginning and you can't assume it's already there. So, I mean, each class that I run is basically, in my mind, it's like has been an experiment. I had an idea for how we could get to a certain goal of learning a certain thing, and I, designed how we should get there. But there was one year in particular when I had basically back-to-back programs in many different places, and I think that there was one class in particular where I had just finished doing several other things. And at that point, I was like, in my headspace, I was like, I treat everyone as if I've known them for years. And in general in life, because I feel like it really helps me to not have to talk about the weather, although the weather is becoming much more topical as far as like, climate change and everything. But it used to just be like, oh, hey, nice weather, or whatever, or like, oh, no, it's been raining. And which is really uninteresting to me. So I thought, like, how can I avoid chit chat, which I'm so super not interested in? And it's like, okay, everybody I meet, I treat them as if I've known them for years, and see how, and, usually it works. Like usually I can feel very connected to people or become connected to people very quickly, but in a group setting, you just really need to build up individual trust, and that's the most important thing. So, and for whatever space we're having, even if we're going to do a 1 hour online class, I still need to know who's in the room, why are we here together, a little bit about the context of their background, because it matters. It's not the technology or whatever the thing is matters. You have to prove that they matter, and you have to build up a trust that they matter, and that's the most important thing for bringing any humans together, whatever the topic, I think. So I would say that was probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, that it relates to every single thing in life and work.
You have an example of a lesson plan or something, how you switch from machine learning or drones to something more personal about like human experience?
Well, so with the drone class, for example, so I had well, there's this Vox show called, or it used to be, it's not happening anymore, but it was Johnny Harris. Oh, it was called Borders. The series was called Borders. And so this guy from the US, he would fly around the world and he would take his drones and his equipment with him, and he would write fascinating stories about the politics of borders, and comparing one side of the border to another side of the border, talking about borders all over the world. And so there's a series online that you can still see. Obviously the archive is there, and I really loved it. Made history exciting. It made like, yeah, it just kind of gave you a bite size, very fascinating look at the world that you otherwise wouldn't have ever had, so I saw that, and then I was like, I need to make a class on that. That's perfect class, because I'm always really interested in new technologies. And so at the times I was really interested in drones, and I was like, okay, how can we use this technology in the context of something important? Of course, it's borders. And then I got really lucky to partner with the Sensorium Festival in Bratislava, and then we found other partners, and we applied for funding and we got it. So then we could invite people to attend from Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic, the V4 countries. And so the thing is that like the fascinating part is that they all live very near each other, but the politics is all very different. And right now, Hungary and Poland are kind of at the extreme of like the political complicated scenario right now, where things really are not going in a positive way. And so we wanted to bring people together to be able to talk about these things. And yeah, it was just such a fascinating time to be able to be around people and talk about the differences and similarities of all of these countries and their experiences, and and realize so many things are controversial, like even, like what I have been referring to as Eastern Europe for a long time. It's debatable whether it's even Eastern Europe. It's very likely Central Europe, and like, and even how we define these words. And actually it's kind of been going back and forth, and there's debate among like philosophers and politicians, and so it's interesting to see how not straightforward these things are, because you would think, like the term, uh, any term to classify any region is kind of in a way fixed, but actually nothing. It's almost like nothing is really fixed, and so I think that in that kind of way it brought together all these things in one, because you have to talk about the personal in order to get to the talk about why politics and borders matter. And actually with the drones too, it was also really an interesting use case, because different countries have different like drone laws and regulations and things, and so it even brings up these topics about where you can and can't fly a drone, for example, and why. Like there's this interesting, well, I think it's interesting, like you can't fly a drone near a prison, for example, or like you can't drive there are like these no-fly zones, or obviously like near an airport as well, but or military areas. And it's like, in my mind, it's in my mind, the new regulations on drones actually have to do more with the fact that the watchers don't want to be watched anymore. And so I think that's just a really interesting scenario, like how much of this is that the drone might see something that it shouldn't see, or that people don't want it to see, and that's why these regulations are happening, as opposed to like, I don't know, they're because they're arbitrary rules otherwise, why you can and can't fly a drone in a certain place. I mean, it makes sense with airports, but in other places, in other areas. And so it's like, and more police around the world are starting to use drones to monitor people. And in fact, I would definitely argue that they're the ones who need to be monitored. And a lot of the things going on in the world, like police brutality and things, I mean, if only we could all film everything and then really get a different perspective on like who started what and who's doing what and who's at fault and this kind of thing. But like, so yeah, it just brings up so many interesting topics, and that's just like one technology and you know one subject, borders and humans. I mean, it's so there's always many ways to explore the humanity and the societal impacts of a technology, and it's just that you have to think about it for a second, which I feel like most people who are focused on teaching technology don't ever really get to, which I think is a shame, and which I would like to try and change.
I have this question that comes to mind. What is your dream? If there is an ideal state that you imagine, what is that? Because I feel like doing this work it is tough. And I mean, we come in with a lot of naivety and maybe innocence of, something that we dream of, a better world. And I wonder what that looks like for you.
Well, the thing is, I keep picturing this parallel universe that is not this place, very similar but very different, in which like the people who have, so the power structures are very different. It's not like, or even one might, it's opposite and better, opposite but not quite, because that would just be another extreme that is like not really fulfilling for anybody. But I guess it's like, also, I remember when I used to like tell people, like, if I'm doing something annoying, do it back to me so I know, so I can see for myself if it's annoying, and then many times I would be like, oh yeah, that sucks, I'm sorry. Like I I'll stop doing that, whatever the thing is. So, but so I feel like in a way that's part of the thing as well, that people are not experiencing the thing that they're like screaming about or whatever, like for example with the whole thing about being a person of color, or being not a white person. I think that that is actually a significant experience in life that people go through, that if you were just a white person in the world, you may not ever have experienced, with the isolation, the kind of otherness that happens, or like you're just treated in a completely different way that people wouldn't know about. And so then they can rationalize, well, why is this an issue? I've never treated anybody badly or whatever. And it's like, it's not about that. It's like an experience that you can't know, unfortunately. And maybe we can try to put it in a different context, but yeah, I think that's just the interesting thing, is like, how do we get people to understand the things they can't know, but it from in another kind of way, so that they can start to get a clue about this. And so whatever, I think in a parallel world that I would like to be in, the power structures are very different. The systems that govern us are different also. Like capitalism isn't capitalism in the way that we know it, and it's and the way people survive and what they do in their life is different. And art matters, and people respect it, respect that. Like, I mean, if we took away all the art right now, life would be so bleak. People take it for granted that it exists in the world and that it has value, because hello everyone, artists make no money. Why is this happening? If you love it so much, oh, that song touched you, did you buy the song? Like, are you, it's like, there's like a lot of take and not a lot of give. And I think in that ideal world, all of these things will be different. All of these things will be like, the things that matter will be understood and respected. The power structures are different. The value systems and the monetary systems are different. And I still want to believe that that world is possible. And as long as I live, I want to work towards that scenario, even as far-fetched as it might be. But I don't know. I feel like if we look at history, things do change. Revolutions happen, things, and even climate change might be forcing people to recognize things that they otherwise would have been ignoring forever. So, hopefully, I don't know. I have to stay hopeful. Like, I think this is just the fundamental thing. I'm so glad I'm not a pessimist. It's like, I mean, in a way, I guess you could say I am, but I'm also I just have like so much hope. I have to have it. So I'm so grateful for that, because it's like, I don't know, it's sanity, and like and seeing still good things in the world, feeling good, having a good experience, all these things still matter, and it's because of having hope, I think. So I never want to lose that.
How funny. I recorded a podcast episode with Priyanka, who is the founder of One with Earth and Soapaholic, social enterprise in Singapore, and she was saying that we have to be hopeful to play our part in this world, and that I think something about pessimism has the power to reduce our collective consciousness. And I mean, for me, when I heard that, something moved within me. I felt like I needed to hear it at that point, just because all that is happening in the world can feel very pessimistic, but it's so true. Like, you have to be hopeful to play your part, because if you don't have hope, you don't act, and if you don't act, who is going to change the current structures and systems? And actually, what I find interesting also is that, like, with cryptocurrencies, and actually in the tech space, because it's so much of like, horizontal ways of working, which I found was quite inspiring when I first got to know the tech space through IM, Internet Age Media, our mutual contact, that there are people who are in the tech space that are trying to reinvent the wheels and trying to do things differently, and then using cryptocurrency and these different strategies to basically reinvent a money system online, to then be able to support the arts, be able to support environmental conservation work, to be able to support community-driven work. It's still very experimental as of now. I don't know if it will, I mean, it seems like it is gaining some form of traction, but I think it's very exciting. It feels kind of abstract as well, because it's like, it just exists like in an online thing. It's not even a real thing. But it's the same thing with gold. Like, why is it so expensive? You cannot eat it. Like, what do you do with that? But then, because people place a value on it, when there is a demand, there is a price, and then there is value in that. So then, I feel like the systems that we create, because we can create them, we also have the ways of changing them and how it looks. It's all in the mind, because it's like, essentially they are just human and social constructs. But the narrative that we've been telling ourselves of capitalism and how the way is has been so ingrained that I think a lot of people don't see a way of it being done differently, or a way of life that could be different. And I think the ways in which, all these investments that's pulling people more and more into this capitalist system, like when you start investing, and when you are one of these like other micro investors among others that has a stake in a company, has a stake in the economy, then the more you don't want to give up on capitalism, because you can benefit of it. You have an illusion that you are gaining from it. So then, I don't know, it's a funny thing. Like, we are just like, humans are full of contradictions. I think this is what Lucy shared in the podcast episode that I did with them earlier in the seasons.
No, that's definitely the thing. I mean, the thing you're talking about is NFTs, I think, and I feel like I have gone through a mental journey in my understanding of NFTs, because the first thing I heard about them was that they were an environmental catastrophe, which was very painful. No, the first thing I heard was like, oh wow, a way to sell digital art online so that artists can start to earn money. And which has been, I mean, I've attended conferences that were like, how can we get interactive artworks to sell? How can we get money in the hands of artists? Finally, there's this thing that happened. For a second, it was like, oh my God, amazing. And then all of a sudden, no, environmental catastrophe, abort. And then it was like so depressing, such a mind fuck, because like so many people that I know were doing well in that space, but then it's like, but you also are a person who cares about the environment, so like, why are you doing this? Don't you see the contradiction? And it was like really a time of like not understanding like who you can trust, and what, like, do people have ideals that they hold, or is it just because money comes and then they all like kind of fall to hell or something? So it was very confusing. But now I think I'm back to the point of believing that they can be useful in circumstances, and that at least people are trying new systems, because I feel like the current systems are really not working. And I know a lot of people want to defend the current systems in favor of the newer ones, and saying that, oh well, but the newer ones are unregulated and people can lose a lot of money. Well, it's like, it's always a risk. And in fact, you can lose money in the regular system as well. Maybe you have been lucky and not had that experience, but the regular system can also screw people out of their money. And so in that way, like, there's risk in any kind of system, in any kind of place that is holding on to your money and your values. So I just feel like glad that people are trying something new. They're trying to come up with something new, even if it's not there yet. I mean, nothing just exists and all of a sudden is perfect. It needs to be tested. It needs to kind of go through all of the different challenges to understand how to make it better. So, and yeah, I'm thinking right now, for example, like as I was talking about taxes with you, one of the things that is so frustrating is that we're not able to understand everything in the world, right? And so even with taxes, myself included, and most of the people I know do not understand taxes at all, especially like creative humans. No, creative humans mostly don't understand taxes. If they're lucky, they have someone who trusted who does. But I was working with, I paid some people to do my taxes. I paid them a lot of money, and they gave me just bad information. And so now the way that it works, because of that bad information, like probably my next year is going to be really complicated because I'm going to have to deal with the ramifications of what their information made me do, you know, to make me have to pay way more in tax than I should, had they not just given misinformation. So it's really, like, as far as this is why I think artists, creatives, we need to understand more about how these things happen, because we can all easily fall into a trap of trusting in someone who doesn't really understand the nuance of your particular situation, and then gives you really bad advice, and then you're kind of screwed. So in that way, yes, I'm certainly glad right now that there are opportunities to still, despite everything, for artists to possibly make money with, for example, the NFT space, or even communities, like communities in need that are able to do that. And I want to get to the point where I feel comfortable, if necessary, also utilizing those tools, because I also have succumbed to just misinformation from trusted authorities, and I think it's good that there are other alternatives. I don't know if you know, if we're willing to let go. I wanted to let go of ego, because you know, nobody wants to feel like they need money. Like, everybody wants to just imagine that everybody can imagine we're all fine. Need money? I'm fine. No, no, no. But it's like, the reality is much different. The reality is we all need help, especially if we're like artists leaning as a practice. It's like, I don't know, unless people have come from money, I don't know any artists that are just financially well off based on their art. So so yeah, I think, well, I don't know, I think this is going to be the next challenge, is getting people all on the same page with the same understandings, because it's almost like, I guess it's like, before you can what is this saying? It's something like, not before you can change the system, you have to understand the system. Before you can change anything, you have to understand what the rules are, and then something like this. I don't know.
You
So
have to
that's,
understand the rules to be able to break it. I think that was
yeah.
the
So that's the current thing. It's like, okay, now I've educated myself. I mean, I'm still learning, of course, too. I'm still barely understanding what the hell just happened. But whatever I learn, I want to pass on to other people and get these conversations happening, so that in the future we all are better informed, and especially in regards to our money, because I mean, it's survival at this point. And I think, you know, because I feel like artists, or people with a conscience, activists, I feel like there's definitely been this idea that we don't believe in money in the same kind of way that other people do, and so we don't feel like we need it in a way that other people do. But in fact, having money will allow us to hire people and give and help more people, you know. And I feel like that's a thing that matters, you know. And you don't have to be like a crazy capitalist to be able to do that. But I think, like, it's important that we change the way we talk about money, and we stop saying, like, start believing in the starving artist narrative, and stop believing we don't deserve it because our work is outside of the norm, because in reality we all, especially good people, we really need to find a way to cultivate that, because then we know that what we're going to do is we're going to share it with others who are going to continue that on, and because we can't do it alone. And if we do try to do it alone, we're going to get burned out, and then we're going to have to change the thing anyway, and then there's going to be one less human that's trying. So yeah, I feel like all of these topics are now also very like important to the current conversations going forward.
I'm actually working on a European project with Social Innovation Exchange. It's a European project that involves many countries, including Germany, Poland, Denmark, UK, and Estonia. It's about social innovation and basically we'll be setting up social innovation competence centers. So there'll be different names after, but then in these respective countries. And what I'm really excited about is that, like for Germany, for example, there is quite a lot of work that's already been done in social financing. And I think the UK has had its share of experimentation more with like community bonds and stuff. And I'm trying to find a way to basically what I'm doing is I'm slowly sitting in these conversations I'm having on a European level, like the importance of the arts and how arts is also a form of social innovation, especially in the socially engaged arts sector. And that if we can find a way in, then we can also access these resources in the social entrepreneurship and innovation space, because I feel like there are people who do their thing, and their thing is finance, and their thing is incubation programs or support or entrepreneurship models. And if we just put ourselves in these places where we are immersed in people who are doing this work, then we get inspiration, and we help to innovate our own processes and organizations. So then this is what it really means about ecosystem building and building that social capital and support, so that as a sort of sector that does change making work or social impact work, I think it's just so important to connect the dots and be able to just have a tighter bond and intersect even more across different disciplines, across all these different categories, because everyone is working towards somewhat a common goal. And we are on our own too little and small, but then collectively, if we are a sum of all these different parts all together, we have so many more resources we can tap on, and things will be a lot easier than if we were just functioning on our own or just within our sector. I kind of really want to ask this question, like, why is it called the School of Machines, Making, and Make Believe?
Well, I think at the time, I mean, actually, the story is about like with a friend, we created this name generator, so it was like, it was like either school or institute or academy, and then, like just kind of a lot of different words, different categories, and then it would spit out all of these different possible names. And I think I maybe saw School of Machines. And then, I mean, I didn't see Making and Make Believe, but then I was like, but those are the things, I feel like those are all the things that I want to convey, School of Machines, because we are working with technology, so like new technologies, and then making because we're doing, like getting hands-on with things and kind of really trying to learn new practical skills. And then make believe, I feel like, I think it kind of goes again to either playful, but also make believe as an important as a survival technique, like kind of again the dissociating from an experience, and the way the mind holds on to that experience can be a form of make believe. I feel like it can be like just a very important tool, which I don't know. I mean, it's funny because it's, in a way, it's like it's a heavy thing, It's like, I think it's like a heavy. So like when people would look at School of Machines, Making, and Make Believe, maybe it sounds a little bit more like light and like la la la, but actually I feel like the make believe part in my mind actually has a very heavy connotation, or it can. So the fact that it can be both, about survival and also about dreaming of new and better ways. So and I think all of those things together encompass all the things I wanted a school to also be about as a mission. So yeah, that's kind of the origin of that.
I kind of feel like that's the essence of art making for me, at least, because sometimes the reality is too hard to bear, and there's just too much pain that the imagination, the make believe, the fantasies, the stories we tell becomes a place of, escapism, but then also in a way where you create, I think it's a very optimistic thing where you still have this place of imagination where everything is wonderful and beautiful, and it's adventure and it's fantasy, and it's such a beautiful place that you can rest in, and you're constantly going in between these different worlds as we navigate this world that can be a bit crazy right now.
Yeah, totally. I like the idea of rest and care. I feel like those are two main topics at the moment that need more attention and love. Like self-care and care of others, and you need rest in order to have the capacity for either of these things. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but also a lot of sleep to be done. Ha, ha, ha.
I ask this question to everyone I interview. If there is one thing that someone can do to create change in this world, what would it be?
I think know yourself, and like knowing yourself allows you to kind of understand the human experience. But I mean, yeah, like deeply know yourself, not just like how do you want to be perceived by others, you know? It's like I feel like the more that I observe myself, and it's almost like you just want to like put everybody, you know, you just want to like hug everyone. And we all deserve like love and care and understanding and all the things, you know, and then the world would be like, I mean, that would be a revolution, you know, if everybody felt love, cared for, understood, then I think that, yeah, that would be definitely a revolution. So in my mind, that's the place to start.
It, it's actually something that is so fundamental and simple, but then somehow it's not simple.
I mean, yeah, I think it's easy to overthink this, but this is also why, because I feel like I've had the luxury to approach it from many different angles over my life, that I get where it's almost like the way I am a good facilitator with technology, because I've learned it myself and I know where we struggle. Like I know where, you know, like you think all the code is important, and in fact really only certain parts of the code matter, you know. And so like it's like where to put your focus. And I think this is part of the thing that I think I'm good at, is knowing where to focus and where not to focus, and trying to help people to go there. And I think it makes things easier, because I think, for example, like a lot of people will, like maybe they base their sense of self on what their family told them who they are, for example, which is not necessarily who they actually are. But when you've heard something over and over, you might have adopted that as an understanding of that, of who you are. So it's really just kind of taking everything away and then starting anew with your own observations of yourself and your own motivations, and like, and yeah, and it's quite fundamental. And it's actually, I mean, you know, I'm best friends with myself, and like we hang out and we laugh together. And it's funny because I remember at the beginning with the pronouns thing, you know, it was a little bit like confusing, the they them. I didn't quite understand they them, but then I'm like, actually I am totally a they them. It's like me, myself, us, we're like we're they, you know, like technically. Like in reality it's like, because I don't think any of us are really just one entity, you know, or like one, it's like I have like, I mean, and not in a crazy way, you know, it's not like I have like multiple personalities and we're all like, you know, or whatever. I mean, even that could be fine, but just saying, just saying that I feel like I am a built-in team of myself and us and we and them, and like, and so in that way I don't think we're exactly alone, you know, not in the way that people will try to convince you that you're alone and then they'll give you an app, you know, to remedy your aloneness, you know. It's like, I don't know, I see it as a positive, and like, and you have yourself to share an experience with, and to get to know and to question and all the things, and to be supportive and loving, and like, oh, don't worry about that, we know we did the best we could there, and like, you know, it's like, I don't know. So it's like build up the cheerleader in you and the team in you, and I think that really takes us far if we are able to get there.
There is actually this therapy, I guess, technique or tool called internal family systems. So then what it is that in every one of us, we have different characters. So like, for example, there's a part of us that is always jealous, or there's a part of us that's like the carer of everyone, like the mother figure. There's a part of us that is the dreamer, or like the very happy self. There are all of these different parts of us that makes up who we are. And I found it really helpful to, really just go back into your childhood, where however far you can go into, like question yourself, which are the characters that exist within me? What are their names? And then the more that you paint a picture of them, the more that you can visualize them, the more you can see yourself in terms of these different parts. It's not like in a very crazy way, but just, when you can start to address each part of yourself for what it is, then you can really tunnel into, like, for example, where is the hurt coming from? Which part of me didn't get enough attention, or which part of me went through a lot of pain and didn't get enough support. And then when you have these other more nurturing parts coming in to support these other parts that are hurting, there is a way of kind of healing yourself. I think this technique takes time to really put up on, and to be able to be completely comfortable with yourself, to love yourself and be your best friends. I think it's it's quite a journey, but that's a useful tool for anyone who wants to like look into it. I have a
I think, oh, sorry. Well, I just want to add really quickly that in that regard, one of the things that I super love is the amount of knowledge we actually hold without having to read a book about it. And that's kind of the thing, what I mean when I'm talking about self-observation, because I didn't know about internal family systems, and it sounds really cool, but I love that I could actually know about it in a way with just observing myself. So that, like, because I think I used to think that all knowledge came from books or from teachers or something, but in fact, if we just stay quiet and observe ourselves and question ourselves and go through that whole process, we learn so much about the human experience. And then when you read books, it like lines up, so like, but we don't. So yeah, it's just, I think that I want to call attention to that like there's so much that we can know and do know if we pay attention to it. And um and yeah, just want to make sure that that's said.
Yeah. I have a final random question. Um, what is your favorite onion dish?
Interesting. Favorite onion dish, huh? I like caramelized onions, but I don't think of it as a dish necessarily. But I mean, what do you mean by onion? I think, or like onion soup or this kind of thing. I don't
Yeah,
think
anything.
yeah, I mean, I think I would go with caramelized onions on anything are amazing. Also, yeah. But actually, maybe I'll ask you then, what brought you to the place of the kingdom of onions? It's like, how is the onion the thing you have identified as a place of enlightenment or something? Turning the table around. You.
So it's interesting because for the past 2 episodes, the food of choice had been caramelized onions. Just to put that forward.
That's
And then
funny.
also like 2 episodes before, I was asked the question, what is your favorite onions dish? But then now you're asking me a different question, which is like, why onions? How did it come about? So I guess it's really it's super organic. So I was having all these really philosophical conversations with my friend in France, back when I was living there, over like dinner in the kitchen, like tiny kitchen in Marseille. And then we were chopping onions, and then we are like, right, like let's try and start something, build something up. Maybe it's a company, or maybe it's a podcast or workshops. And what should we call it? And then we were chopping onions, and we are like, right, onions, because you peel the layers. There are so many layers to it, and we are never done with peeling all of our layers. And there is so much more to understand, not just about the world, but also about ourselves. That really the entire act is about peeling that, going deep in, and talking about it. So then that's kind of really where everything came about. And I think food is just something that unites everyone, and it makes everyone feels better when you are uh is it hungry and angry. Food solves everything. So then yeah, I think like the idea of having a food there just felt like it would lighten things up a little bit.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, also, I the part that you left out was the crying part. that like inevitably, like sometimes we just cry, you know, like that's part of the peeling back the layers, because sometimes it's like tears are there, but then in the end you still can have like a yummy meal. So in that way, it's all kind of like a whole, oh, dare I say, holistic experience. Again, I have to go read up on this now and buy a book on it or something. It's like, why does it keep coming out of my mouth? I'm not usually a person who uses that term at all. So it's
Maybe that's just a word that speaks to you now, you know, like being whole, like finding that wholeness within like yourself or just like everything that's out there.
I think
Yeah,
that's
but
definitely a thing. I want to be whole. I want you to be whole. I want everyone to feel whole. But so like I yeah, I mean, I don't know if that necessarily means holistic, but I definitely want to be whole. So there's definitely that.
but on a
Mhm.
side note, I think crying is a very healthy thing to do. Like forget about masculinity, toxic masculinity, whatever. Just cry. Releases your stress hormones, just let it all out. You can do it like on your own in a safe space and
With
close space,
friends.
or do it with friends. Yeah, like we should have crying parties.
Totally. Oh my gosh.
I had this idea to do like a performance where you just have onions and everyone chops onions and then you just cry and then you throw the onions everywhere, and it doesn't matter if you're real crying or onion crying, because you know that's your perfect excuse there to just let these emotions out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. I actually, when you're saying that, I was also picturing like talk radio on or something. And so like you hear the news and you're chopping onions. And so it's like another element of potentiality for, um, but yeah. Well, we should try it sometime.
Yeah, we
I'm
should.
down. I have some onions.
So we meet in person next time. Hopefully that will be soon. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I always love talking with you. You're awesome. So, I mean, I'm sorry that that might be a very American word, but I just think you're just a wonderful human, and I love what you're doing and how you connect other people and your mission statement. And yeah, you know, I mean, I told you before, if I had a lot of money, I would love to give it to you to do wonderful things. So like, and this is also a motivation for me to find ways to have more money as well, because I want to give my money to people like you who are going to do great things with it. So if anyone's listening, if you give either of us money, it's all going to go to good places. So consider that.
But you are awesome too. I just want to remind you that I appreciate you for the work that you do, the hours that you spend, your heart and your soul and your energy and your attention and all of that towards making the world a better place, but also helping yourself, supporting yourself and the people around you. Because I think that's important work, that's valuable work. And, you know, one of our conversations about how care work is often undervalued.
Mm,
And it's important that more of us do that. And we all have the capacity to do it, and we all have the capacity to act. It's not that social change or systems change is so far away and big that nobody can make a difference. We are all doing things step by step because we respond and because we care. And I think activism is essentially about caring for other human beings, caring about society, caring about the world. And everyone can do something, be it, you know, starting from creating spaces to hold conversations with people, like holding space for people to talk about their emotions or feelings, to talk about situations and what's happening in the world, to be able to express those emotions. All of these matter and they help because we're all on this collective journey of healing. And I think in the situation like now, it feels like we are reaching this breaking point in this world, and it's bringing forth a space for radical healing to happen. And it's about how many more people we can get on board and collectively do this work together.
exactly. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Um,
A
yeah.
good place to end this.
Yeah. No, that was great. It's perfect. Big
Thank
hug, group hug.